Good evening. My name is James Kemp. I'm an independent filmmaker from Salem, Oregon. Right now I'm working on something new in the way of a project. I'm working in the state of our worldwide pandemic of the COVID-19 virus. I went into isolation myself early on. March 11th, I went into total isolation in my little 5-room apartment in Salem, Oregon. And it was only about 4 or 5 days later that the entire world went into isolation. At first, I thought I would record my experiences and publish them on YouTube and other media. Just my daily experience of being isolated and unable to go out into the community because, hey, I'm 72 years old. I have a very rare respiratory condition called hypersensitivity pneumonitis. When I'm exposed to certain substances, my lungs fill up with fibers. And that's an important little hint there, maybe down the road, but I don't intend to, let's see, how would T.S. Eliot put it? I don't intend, that is a hair that I do not intend to start in this video. So, I am working with 20 actors probably, maybe 30 cast and crew members all together on Facebook with a site that I created called the Lemonade Network, and that's L-E-M-O-N, Lemon, and Aid, A-I-D, Network. Lemonade Network actually came about before I started the video project that I'm working on. And let's just call it a film, even though it's not a film as such. But it occurred to me that if we're maintaining social distancing, if we are wearing masks, if we are isolated in our homes as we were for many, many days, that would change the face of what filmmaking looks like everywhere. The first time I saw evidence of the change was on American Idol. If you remember the last few episodes of American Idol, the last 10 or 5 contestants, all of their entries were taped in their homes or on their patios or whatever, and you started to see what this new medium is going to look like, where you have one person on a screen at a time, isolated from everybody else, with different lighting, and then everybody started getting into the Zoom phenomena. If we're going to have meetings and so forth, as I have had many meetings, then using Zoom as a technology kind of results in the same kind of issue. You have one person in a frame talking to many other people in their frames, and the question is, how do you work that into a coherent whole visually? So let me tell you just a little bit about the origins of this particular project. The film itself is titled Veil of Secrecy 2020 - Danny Attacks the Virus! In 1978, I was finishing up a career as a young English speech, art, drama teacher at a small school in Illinois, the Alexis School District, which no longer exists. I taught high school English, junior high language arts, high school art. I was a speech coach. I directed class plays, that kind of thing. I knew that I was going into a different career in the spring of 1978, and in the last few months that I was employed as a teacher, my speech class came to class one day, and we had all seen a zombie movie. And this was, for 78, this is fairly new stuff for the average person to know about. the movie itself, it was on the Feature Creature, I believe, on WQAD, I believe, in Rock Island, Illinois, on a Saturday night, and the name of the movie was Night of the Living Dead. And everybody knows now, of course, that is one of the major zombie movies, independent movies made by who? George Romero. I think maybe the budget was $60,000 in black and white. And my class, everybody came in and everybody had seen it. And so we sat there in class and we decided, hey, let's make our own movie. And so we worked out a storyline, we developed a plot, we looked around town for places to do the film, and we came up with what became Veil of Secrecy, the original 1978 black and white 8mm, no sound, filmed in a opera house in this small town. Very unusual building. The bottom floor used to be shops at the time in '78. It was a hardware store owned by the McKnight family. The second floor was a theater, and Alexis, Illinois was known back then as the American home of the Clydesdale horse. And Alexis was always kind of a horsey little town. So back in the day, in the 1890s, some of the plays, presentations, whatever you want to call them, operas I suppose, that were done in the opera house on the second floor of this building were horse stories where there would be a plot involving a heroine being captured and so forth, and it always involved then a live horse being ridden on stage by a beautiful woman, usually lying on her back on the horse, that kind of thing. It was fairly common in the 1890s. Well, by 1978, all of those things in that second floor that related to the old Victorian 19th century American theater were still there. And I think they're still there today. We're talking about flats, hand-painted Victorian flats, many of them. A stage with footlights that were actually kerosene lamps. Interesting paintings on the wall, that kind of thing. But overall, in 1978, spooky, very spooky. And so it was a perfect setting for us to have our zombie wedding and our zombie wedding banquet. And the banquet back then consisted of the main character, the hero, Marty Edwards, and Marty is now the sheriff of Warren County, Illinois, but when he was a senior in high school, he was my male lead, and Kelly Winkler, I believe she works for, I don't know, she's got quite a career going. She travels quite a bit around the world. Kelly Winkler was the Spectre. Now, we didn't have the second in command that we have in the new version. So about every 10 years, this is like the people on Madagascar. The people on Madagascar, every so many years, they go to the catacombs where their ancestors' mummies are located, and they bring food for the mummies, and they pull the mummies out and unwrap them from the rugs that they're bound in, and then they feed the mummies, and then they put them back. So that was the case with this particular little project. About every 10 years, I would do something with it. 1988, I added some sound. I did a little bit of editing on it. By that time, we were already into video taping. We had some very guerrilla tactics that we used in editing film, videotape back then. On YouTube, there's an interview that my son Jeff did with me in 1988, just kind of interviewing me when he was 10 years old about how that black and white movie came about. 1998, I added a soundtrack with a narrator, that kind of thing, some more special effects, you know, trying to jazz it up a little bit. Put it on YouTube, and it became one of those things that, you know, they watched at class reunions when they would have class reunions back in Illinois. And, you know, today it hasn't quite hit 1,000 viewers, but really close at this point. That's the old black and white version. So here I am wondering about what I'm going to do in the way of creating a new film genre, which I would call the isolation film, during this pandemic. And if you watch Amazon Prime Video sometimes these days right now, you'll see some new small efforts by different filmmakers around the world, around the country, that take some of the considerations into mind in creating these films that have to be done when people can no longer share a studio, or they can no longer be in the same room at the same time with other actors and the production crew and so forth. Fortunately, I have been associated with a theatrical group in Staten, Oregon, which is about 15 miles from where I'm sitting right now, east of Salem. Starting off as Aumsville Community Theatre. I used to be in their radio shows. They would do a monthly radio show that was broadcast on a local radio station eventually. And then I was in several of their plays and got to know the group very well, and they agreed to produce my original musical adaptation of Miklos Laszlo's play And the Snowfalls, and that was done for Christmas 2019. Then we went into isolation, and then the theaters were closed, and we were just at a point here in Salem, Oregon, where we were really developing some great little theater groups. The Pinnacle Theater has been around, 1954, I believe, and celebrated. I think they're ready for their 65th anniversary or whatever. But the Pinnacle is closed. The Pinnacle is the closest thing we have to good semi-professional regional theater right here in Salem. Then Vinny Maduri founded Enlightened Theatrics at the Grand Theater downtown. I was fortunate enough in 2016 to be cast in his production of the Royal Shakespeare Company's adaptation of The Wizard of Oz. I played the Professor Marvel, and I played the Wizard, working with many professional people from around the country, notably professional dancers from New York, some of whom I've asked to be in the film that I'm talking about that we're making right now. We have Kaiser Homegrown in Kaiser. I'm a member of the 45th Parallel Playwrights. It's a group of playwrights who get together once a month. We read each other's plays. We have actors come in and read our plays, and we do a lot of revisions and adaptations and so forth, and it's a very, very good group to be with. So I decided I would start inviting people to be in the new Veil of Secrecy 2020. The first person who came to mind to play the part that Marty Edwards played in the black and white movie was a young man named Max Mortar. Maybe you have seen him. He played the high school football star in Pinnacle's production of Yellow. I first saw him in one of Juliana Gibbons' productions of Twelfth Night at South Salem High School. Salem is the school district is almost a magnet for drawing talented young people in. Alyssa Bond at North Salem High School. The choreography that she gets out of her kids is amazing. professional quality dancing. And then all of the high schools in Salem have drama programs that are good programs. Back to the film. So I decided that I would start writing the screenplay to Veil of Secrecy 2020. And that has been an experience, because not only am I looking at dialogue, not only am I looking at settings, lighting, costuming, but I'm also looking at the various camera shots, because the camera shots in this film are, many of them are going to have to be done as selfies by the actual actors who are playing the parts. We were very fortunate early on. We came out of isolation into stage 1, I guess we called it, where you could have people get together in isolation or in social distancing situations, wearing masks, having their temperatures taken and so forth, and maybe as many as 20 people could join. I was lucky enough to have Aumsville Community Theatre, which now is the Spotlight Community Theatre in Staten, Oregon, agree to let me use their theater for what I called Zombiethon 2020. And essentially Zombiethon 2020 involved individual actors scheduled every half hour coming in and doing some green screen filming, very significant parts that you might not be able to do that well if they're doing a selfie, as an example. So for May 30th and May 31st, we must have had, I would say, maybe 15 out of the 20 cast members come in and do their video tapes. Now we have pretty much filmed up until what I would call scene 5, and then there are settings within each one of these scenes, and then there are shots, camera shots within each one of the settings. We're ready for scene 6, and scene 6 is the zombie wedding. And for this scene and for most of the rest of the production, a former student of mine and a personal friend of mine, a musician, John Heasley, back in the little town where I taught, is our videographer, drone operator, etc. And John has gotten in touch with the people who now own that Opera House building back in Illinois, and we are using that as Zombie Central. It's a very scary looking building in the first place, and we've kind of upped the ante by making it look scarier than it really is, I suppose. But when you get upstairs, you never know what you're going to find there, and John's going to be filming all of that, which we'll use as backdrops for the green screen scenes. So with scene 6, we are creating 2 very important segments which we anticipate will become individual music videos. The first takes place at the wedding itself and is a tribute to Michael Jackson's Thriller. Obviously we can't use the Thriller music, we'd be violating copyright, and it would cost way too much to buy the permission to use it. So I've written my own adaptation of Thriller, which is which has already passed the muster on YouTube and doesn't set off any alarms or any copyright violations or anything of that sort. So in that scene, we will have some of the professional dancers who worked with me in Wizard of Oz. They're in New York, and in Kansas, and they are now going to be receiving a screenplay like I suppose has never been written before, because a screenplay typically doesn't track every single camera shot that the camera would do, but it's rather a live experience in a studio with a whole bunch of people controlling all of the effects. So I'm working very hard on scene 6. Scene 7 is a wedding banquet. The theme song for the banquet is Cole Porter's Begin the Begin. We've already had YouTube reject one of the adaptations of Begin the Begin as a violation of Warner Brothers copyright. You can have your own theories as to how Warner Brothers got the copyright to Cole Porter's music, but yeah, gotta have a good attorney these days. So scene 7, we have a local actress who, when I say local, I mean Tracy Wachter Weber is local for the entire Portland, Willamette Valley theatrical community. Tracy has played everything from Evita and at the Majestic Theater in Corvallis. Last year she was one of the lead characters in Portland production of Urinetown, and Tracy is going to be the bride, the Strigoi, if you will, or zombie bride in our film. And Tracy and her vocal coach are working up a version of Begin the Begin in which they use their own lyrics, and so far it's passed muster, and YouTube has no problems with it violating any copyright. And then we have Toby Loftus in Portland. Toby, you've probably seen some of Toby's work on Facebook. Toby is a musician, composer. Toby started doing these virtual orchestrations on the Lemonade Network on Facebook. There's one of his videos up, and Toby has, I don't know, 15, 20 different musicians from around the country, maybe some from foreign countries, all playing the Brandenburg Concerto in their homes. And so you have each one of them in squares, just like a Zoom meeting, and they're all playing the same thing, and it's all orchestrated beautifully. And it's I'm honored to be able to tell you that Toby is presently doing the same kind of arrangement for his version of Begin the Begin. Then we have some weird stuff, you know, Max. I don't want to give away the plot or anything. You'll see it. Our goal is to have this in the can, out to the public by October 1st, 2020. And today is June 30th, 2020. So we have 90 some days, which seems like a long time. But there's a lot of editing because scene 8 actually takes place inside the main character's lungs, in kind of a tribute to the old science fiction movie Fantastic Voyage. And the final scene, you know, here we are in Oregon where we're an open carry state. You can carry a weapon, and Oregonians will never give up their weapons. And my proposition is, if the COVID-19 virus were big enough so it no longer fit the human lungs, the COVID virus would be lying out there on the ground someplace, and some Oregonian with a gun would figure it was about time to shoot it. Now, that may be a spoiler alert, but when you see the film, you'll understand that it's not really a spoiler alert. Okay? So what I want to share with you now is a segment from our Zombiethon on May 30th and 31st, and these are just little clips. You can see the protocols that we used to achieve a level of safety My assistant director, Beverly Wilson, was seated by the front door. Beverly is a retired registered nurse. She was sitting there with an infrared thermometer, taking everybody's temperature, doing a brief health history, making sure that they're all wearing masks, and so forth, one at a time for about a half-hour session. And so what you're going to see are some of the green screen clips that we did. Some will be used in the film.